Hello, this is Wayne O'Connor at WayneO'Connor.com, Fantasy Theater. And this is part 2 of Half Jack and Leprechaun. Phil, now officially known as Toymaker Leprechaun, or Agent Toymaker to everyone but the office personnel, shifted his attention from memory lane, what little he could remember, to a CAD schematic program on his computer. Phil's side of the office was roughly the western half of the room. Rena's side of the office, which contained the concealed door into her father's old office suite, was on the east side of the room. He gazed over his computer at a row of file cabinets and storage lockers, and back to a sim-concealed doorway. Ancient sim programs had an uncanny way of taking objects that were close to its walls and blending them into its presentation or masking them. In this sim, his workshop door was the entry of the Castle Abbey. Phil's workshop, just through the doorway, was not as large or as well apportioned as the ones in K-Lab or Shark Lab, but it was still a fine shop. He did not like the high-pitched snorting whine of the grinders or the stench of stick weld splatter, but he was comfortable with the smaller tools, manual or energized. Nor did he like the silver-gray dirt that seemed to cling to his face, arms, and every bodily crevice and leave stains in his shower. But he did like the satisfaction of a job well done. Tools for working with small gadgetry were waiting for him on one of the work tables inside the shop, neatly arranged with the necessary parts for his project of the day. They called with a siren's call as they sat ready to go on the main workshop table. Two offices of equal size, one that was Jack's, could be accessed through a door on the west wall, and one that was locked could be accessed through a door on the east wall. The east office suite had belonged to Victor Katsopoulos. The walls of Phil and Rena's office had landscape sims that concealed the other office doors, but not the elevator doors. The south wall contained the elevators to their personal suites. Jack's elevator was on the west side of the south wall. There was also a second elevator next to Jack's, but it was concealed by a sim barrier, like the entrance to K-Lab had been, and opened with an audio sequencer device. Both Rena and Phil's elevators were located on the eastern side of the room, on the south wall. The personal suite elevators were not actually elevators, but teleports. The north wall, in addition to his shop door, contained the elevator that led to the vast, sprawling A-Shark hub and Ancients tunnels. Not a transporter room, it operated as an elevator, and depending on which floor one selected, opened on several levels of the A-Shark complex. Floor 1 led to the main walkways. Higher floors that led to the areas in the main hub opened into security checkpoints. While the door into the elevator did not have a retina scanner, to enter from the elevator back into K-Branch office did require a retina scan. Security was not required to get into the old tunnel networks, just into the hubs. Even though little of Phil's memory of his pre-A-Shark days had returned, his programming wizardry and gadgeteering skills had resurfaced quickly. When he was able to find the code that opened Victor's secret workshop and storage area, he knew he'd found his niche. While his small office shop could work for many projects, some assignments needed the greater scope of tools and lab paraphernalia of Victor's secret workshop. Rena had taken some notes for a project he'd been working on for one of Victor's inventions, an audio sequencer, which was back-engineered from Ancients technology. The entry to Victor's secret lab and storage area was only accessible by using the audio sequencer. When the correct combinations of sounds were played in the proper area of one of the ancients' walk tunnels, a section of the wall disappeared, to reveal another passageway. The tunnel was actually quite similar to the topside solid sim wall of a butte that surrounded their outside patio. Of course, there was also an energy shield canopy in place above the patio which, while allowing some sunlight in, kept everything else from guano to raindrops out. Phil arose from his computer desk, shuffled through the shop door, and to his workbench. On the bench in front of him was a partially disassembled shaving kit that was a multiple-target taser that used 0-point energy. Once he had it working, it would recharge itself after only a few minutes. It not only could tase more targets, it had further range, and all of that without a passel of wires. That item had been a small project that Victor had started, but had never finished. His new job consisted of analyzing, experimenting with, refining, and cataloging inventory from Rena's father's secret warehouse and lab. Occasionally he would get short projects from the main Q lab as well. Uncle Jack had wanted Phil to work in the K-Branch office rather than the main manufacturing facility. Q lab that produced limited quantities of boomer doppelgangers and androids, as well as lasers, tracking devices, Kevlar clothing, communicator shell phones, and a plethora of spy toys. Glancing furtively at Arena, who sat at a desk on the east side of the room, Phil retrieved a glass cube from a bank of storage lockers that lined a section of wall near the workbench. Warped reflections of the main office, finely apportioned in a Rococo style, and the medieval wall sim centered on Rena's desk, danced like a desert mirage within its confines. At first, Phil had thought it was a three-dimensional camera of sorts, but it was actually designed for testing holosuites, like the patio he and Rena had sat in on his first day out of his private hospital. It could be used to take three-dimensional pictures, but that was not its reason for being. Walls in the office and the hub were actually stone walls that had been carved out of the native subterranean rock. Some had been carved unknown centuries past, and other sections more recently. Although there were some naturally occurring caverns and tunnels beneath New Mexico, much of their facility had been drilled by the iron moles, and larger sections carved out with other equipment. The tunnels were different in that they were tubular and smoothed like polished obsidian. Each cavern room was composed of whatever stone was innate to the area, complex machine structures that supplied life support, air, heat, and water for the hydroponic rooms, as well as living areas, work areas, recreational and service areas, each in their appropriate zones, lay sprawled throughout the vast labyrinth of caverns and tunnels like a gigantic underground rabbit warren. In addition to the tubular walkways, there was also a network of small pneumatic delivery tubes that shot torpedoes, like the canisters at the drive-up bank machines in the world above, throughout the network. These smaller tubes were a high-speed document and item delivery system. Larger tunnels housed a subway train system that connected with various sites around North America. These subway trains could travel more than 200 miles per hour and produced what had been termed the Taos Hum, which was part of New Mexican urban legend. While some tunnels or transit systems linked to as many as several hubs, there wasn't a super tunnel or super subway tunnel that linked all of the hubs. Increasingly more tunnels were being made every year, and eventually, or so the plan was, that the hubs would be linked. The farther away from the hub, the more likely one would have to change stations or even travel topside to complete the journey. While not as vastly populated as the conspiracy theorist in the world above claimed, Nonetheless, a sizable population of classified civilian and military personnel lived in the various sites. Originally part of a mysterious chain of complexes whose origins were shrouded in mystery, the American government and other governments below their lands or waters had continued building and, of course, searching for ancient artifacts, just like Colonel O'Neill, Carter, Teal'c, and Jackson on the television series Stargate. Initially a COG and Ancients Technology research project, the vast and expensive secret program expanded, creating sites to conduct ultra-top-secret research. Later, following 2012 and other ELE, extreme life-threatening event fears, there had been a push to create an ultra-top-secret series of underground Alpha Site B complexes. They were called ARCs, and had been designed to house a greater population of well-connected or extremely gifted people in case an above-ground disaster such as a lethal sun flare, nuclear winter, or alien attack, the scenarios were numerous, compromised the populations of the world above. Goal numero uno for the ARC project was to keep a reserve stock of humanity for seed, but in numbers that were easily manageable, much the same goal that the New World Order puppet masters desired for the world above. Extremely compartmentalized security protocols kept even those who lived in these facilities almost as in the dark as the populations that walked the lands above. They had their own urban legends, much like the surface dwellers of aliens, crawlers, snake people, Nephilim troglodytes, Stargate wormhole teleports, lost wandering green and blue children, Agartha entrances, and worries that the government was hiding something from them. And like most urban legends, much was a myth, but also there existed many cases of truth blended with fiction. Jack Callahan's office, also known as K-Branch, was only a small section of the A-Shark hub. Many subterranean hubs existed underneath the United States. Port Washington hub was one on the East Coast. Cheyenne Mountain and Area 51 were two other American hub sites. Jack, Phil's uncle, had some minor oversight functions concerning the general A-Shark complex, but most of the supervision for the facility was delegated. He was also an unofficial ambassador between all of the hubs and whichever U.S. president was in office. While he had a special classification that made him top of the food chain, equal to the directors of each complex, his was a fairly independent position. Being at the top also guaranteed Jack and his crew more time in the world above, or topside, as they usually called it. Many at the bottom of the chain literally lived and died in the world below, having never left the base. Phil perused the circumference of the sim walls of their office. His area, both his office and the adjacent room that was a small workstation and lab, was part of the office where he worked. Jack's crew had a larger lab, K-Lab, a long walk away, but that was only used for special projects. And K-Lab had been lost for years after Rena's father's death, until Phil had discovered an access point. One wall of the office overlooked a castle with waving minarets that was bustling with activity. Each wall frequently overlapped into the scenes on other walls and included acts of jousting knights, jester jugglers, and serfs harvesting corn and pumpkins. One scene eventually transversed all four walls. It was of two ladies with tall cone hats, replete with colorful gossamer streamers. Both medical ladies, as they were pulled around in a canal boat, which circumnavigated the holographic wall sim, when they docked at the castle once per hour, functioned as a clock. Both he and Rena were in the commons area between the Sims. Phil was on the castle and knight's corner, north and west. Rena was on the field and jester wall corner of the room, south and east, although kept low in volume so as not to disturb the occupants. If one listened carefully, from time to time the clash of the knight's swords, the swish of the gliding canal boat, and the chatter of the serfs provided white background noise. Rena's father's expansive suite, the same size as the other two office suites, had been maintained after his death, but it was an amazing, filled to overflowing room of boxes and loose piles of documents, books, and gadgets, heaped in unbelievable disarray that was usually kept locked. Strangely, his private K-lab and storage area, while not neat and well organized, was not nearly as disordered as his personal office. Unlike Jack's office, or the one shared by Phil and Rena, the former Katsophilis office had a permanent sim that could not be changed. Phil enjoyed his daily office routine at the K branch of Advanced Surveillance Hardware and Armaments Research Company. Called SHARC, it was a clandestine organization that supplied products to the American military establishment and alphabet soup agencies like the CIA, as well as a few elite security agencies. SHARC had once specialized in providing field drops on hostile soil, but their job description had changed over the decades, especially after Victor Katsophilis ended his life. Where once the facility, at least topside, had been a small garage with a roof made of fake desert sand that would raise, take vehicles in, and ascend to a parking garage connected to a subterranean base, that exit, while operable, was rarely used. Several levels above Phil and Rena was a topside CIA proprietary facility housed in an abandoned military base which manufactured items such as mess kits and survival gear. Phil limped towards Rena's desk, holding the glass cube. Neat and tidy, her L-shaped hutch desk, carved in a Rococo style, had a computer monitor and printer and an empty desk where she stacked paperwork. Her father had chosen to have the main office suite furniture designed according to an early 1720 French motif, and while alive had frequently pointed at the office furniture, twiddled with his waxed pointy mustache, and joked, "If it's not Baroque, don't fix it." Besides taking calls, one of Rena's jobs was to design training manuals. When she wasn't busy, she usually had her nose in a book. While many people assumed she was not very intellectually gifted because of her propensity to speak in broken English, she was well educated and a good writer. Phil handed Rena the relic and said, "I can't figure out what this object is. Any ideas?" Rena stopped typing, swiveled, and scooted her chair to her second desk. She hefted the cube, felt around its exterior, and then peeked inside. "Surprise one!" exclaimed Phil. "Phil, what are you doing now?" giggled Rena. Her video cell phone beeped and then vocalized a message. "Incoming call for Agent Mouse Lady from ground below security." She looked at the phone's video screen. The security guard was holding a vase of flowers. The guard said, "Ground above security checked them for bugs and bombs. They were clean. Do you want us to send it through the pneumatic tube to your office?" Rena responded in the affirmative, thanked him, and deactivated her cell phone. "Who's sending me flowers?" she teased. "Maybe Uncle Jack?" 3 minutes later, the torpedo, nicknamed Big Donkey, came to a clunky halt, hissed air, and then ejected the office delivery receptacle. "Surprise, too!" exclaimed Phil, as Rena opened the pneumatube hatch and extricated a bundle of red, yellow, and white roses. She read the card, Thank you for nursing me back to health and teaching me the ropes of working in K-Branch, being my friend, and posing for this 3D holographic picture. AFA, Leprechaun Toy Maker, formerly known as Requisition Specialist Callahan. Rena squealed with delight, and she hugged Phil and then said, "You a trickster!" She added, smiling, "Thank you for flowers. Thank you for friendship. I should have known you were up to something. It has been so lonely since—" Phil was deeply crushed by the sudden horror that flooded Rena's countenance. Her dazzling smile of moments before had wilted like dying water-starved flowers. "Rena, want to see the instant replay?" "No, yes. I not know." She flicked her long brunette hair so that it covered her face, and she scrunched down inside of her layers of ankle-length skirts and sweaters. After a few seconds, she tenderly held the cube and peered into its mystical depths. She laughed as she watched Phil bring the relic and then watched herself look into the cube. The scene continued with her receiving the flowers, walking them back to the desk, and reading the card. Finally, the display concluded as she ran around the desk and hugged him exuberantly. Rena stood straighter again after she'd reviewed the three-dimensional video cube and then said, "I forgot to read the postscript. It says, 'Dearest Rena, how about a date? Make that lots of dates, and not the fig kind.'" She motioned for Phil to sit in her spare office chair. Irina smiled. "It is about a time you asked. Threep said you were crazy about me. I just about to give up hope." Then her smile wavered. She hid beneath her hair and scrunched her body again and sat back down in her office chair. She continued, "Phil, I'm not sure this is a good idea. You find a better woman. I have a temper. I am a monster. And a relationship not good for me. Not like to be hurt when the fun all over." Heartbreaking for her, Phil said, "You're not dangerous. You're not a monster. That's silly. And I'm not going to hurt you. What happened? I love you." He held her hand. Rena started to weep. "When I was a young woman, just out of the teens, I work as a courier. I fall in love with the other courier named Billy. He promised to marry, but—" Irina sobbed and abruptly ended her story. "What happened?" asked Phil. "Did he hurt you?" Rena sat upright again and said, "I continue story. I make a drop of daddy's gear to Rambo guys in Guatemala. Run into a small group of Guat guerrillas. It was a small group, natives of the Mercs. Not think they be big problem." Phil continued to hold her hands, soaking in the warm tears, both his and hers, that mixed and fell softly on their clasped hands, intermingling and bonding their hearts. Rena continued to cry. Phil didn't question her further. He decided to wait, and if she wanted to talk about it, she'd talk about it, and if not, then not. "One zapped me with a stun gun. I came out of a shock. They abused me wickedly. A man thing. I almost escaped. Captain and gonads drop him like blackjack ox. Merc shoot me with a Greek fire gun. He laughed at me and he say, 'If you live, secret agent girl, you look like Kim Fook. She famous Vietnamese lady who almost died from napalm burns.'" "But you are alive!" exclaimed Phil. His anguish for her was so intense that it felt like a mental chicken pox that was all the more excruciating because it couldn't be itched. "I'm so glad you survived, Rena. But how?" "I almost make it to a drop. Contacts took out the rest of bandits. I wake up in a hospital." Rena paused and then continued, "I have no arm, no leg, and pain. So much pain in my face. Look like a Joker character with half face from a comic book. One eye gone. See dimly out of other." Irina doubled up and groaned a long, keening wail. she continued. When a Daddy Billy and Uncle Jack come to visit me, and Billy take one look, and then he turn around. He say he not marry. He walked out a door. What a reject, snapped Phil. Does he still work here? That is not the end of the story, continued Rena, snuffling occasionally. I demand Daddy fix, do something. When he leave hospital, Daddy prepare project in a big lab. I know he make things, not know he make androids. Spy stuff, yes, androids, no. C-3PO, yes, big toy, different. Nobody make droids like Daddy, especially cyborg, human-machine mix. He fix me in big lab. He grow some parts in bio. He fashion other parts out of not odd charts, quicksilver, meteor rock, like Roswell spacecraft metal, not same, but like. No wonder you are so beautiful. Rena clutched Phil to her and kissed him long and hard, trembling as suppressed longing loosed itself like waters from a broken floodgate. But then she pushed him away. Then I went to see a Billy. I knew he had a new girl. I say I forgive. I say I love him more than new girl. He cursed me, called me a damn... He called you what? He did what to you? Does he still work here? Demanded Phil. If he does, I want to talk to him. Rena sobbed convulsively and then continued. He called me... Billy say I'm not human now. He say it against his religion to make out to with the half animals and the robots. He called me damn Half Jack. His friends all laugh at the joke. Does Billy still work here? I can't fight an agent with my bare hands, but I have the technology. Rita softly put her hands over his lips, stopped his challenge, kissed him on the neck, and said, No, Phil, he does not work here. I slapped him. He hit me, and I... Phil kissed her hand. He said, It's okay now. You don't have to tell me any more. You are alive and beautiful, and I love you. That's all that matters. Phil was so happy when Rena hugged him again. Once more she gently held his shoulders and pushed him back, giving him that direct look that chilled him to the core of his being. Her mouth gaped. She inhaled sharply, her eyes, hidden behind the thick, non-corrective plastic lenses, pierced into his very soul. Pupils large, like those of Felis domesticus, hunting mice under a waning moon, covered most of her irises. Phil, asked Rena pointedly, did you follow security protocol when you purchased flowers? Phil nodded, not in the affirmative, but in the negative. Rena scowled and shook her head. Why are you not use new identi package? Did you use old credit card? Phil looked away and stammered. I forgot. I'm sorry. How could you? You compromised our facility. Uncle Jack walked in and asked, What's all the hullabaloo? Not letting Rena explain, he said, The sim in my office just died. Yours is on the blink, too. I can't believe you didn't notice. I can't stand looking at bare stone walls all day long, huffed Jack. Well, now that I'm finished venting, if you can unwind yourself from Philly, Rena, replace those sims. It's been almost 30 days, so deep six the castle scene and insert the Caribbean cruise one. Make mine the same. Not to push it, Uncle Jack. I'm not in the mood, exclaimed Rena as she fluidly exited her chair. Rena let rip with a series of hand gestures and Greek obscenities, stalking crisply to a series of small levers on the wall that had been obscured by a pumpkin. She flicked a lever. Phil scowled at the bare stone and then bristled at the cessation of events, feeling a mixture of anger and embarrassment wash over him like a bucket of cold, soapy water. Following a stone-over-stone grating sound, his eyes tracked to a concealed door that now stood open. He watched as Rena entered the room. She hugged the path along the wall, gingerly stepped over boxes, spare parts, and long plastic and cardboard tubes as she made her way to the main desk near the back sim wall. The room's sim looked like a scene out of the movie Pirates of the Caribbean. Piles of blood-splashed papers avalanched from the desk onto a floor mosaic of circling sharks. Rena avoided the floor mosaic and leaned over her father's old desk, and then fished through the scattered debris of the desktop until she found a remote control. She punched a numeric code that beeped each time. Finally, a bookshelf along a side wall slid sideways to reveal a dial-type walk-in safe. Phil suddenly remembered more about his old friend, Commander Gabasta, and the room full of sporting girl pictures that surrounded the inner walls of the painstakingly recreated Al Capone gambling den. Not many networks of memories attached themselves to the mental picture of Gabasta's rec room, but Phil was happy that one or two shards from the shattered stained-glass window of his past had been reattached and repaired. Phil arose and walked over to get a better view of the room. The room on the inside was surrounded with bookshelves, laded with upright books and piled stacks of books and loose manuscripts. Tables set end to end in front of the bookshelves. Each table was stacked to overflowing with boxes and odd curiosities. More boxes and odd tools and assorted bric-a-brac were also packed beneath the tables. Just ahead of the tables, a row of boxes and piles of miscellaneous items formed a topsy-turvy trail. Like all of the office rooms, the vaulted ceilings were about 20 to 30 feet high. The storage area of the room was blended into the wall sim and formed a coral reef that ranged from bright pink to powder blue. Said reef was rife with a colorful array of tropical fish. Tiny olive-green hammerheads with white bottoms, as well as blue-gray sharks with black-tipped fins, patrolled the reef in hunting packs. Along the east wall above the coral ridge was a war galleon that bobbed like a dragon-headed cork in the gently undulating waves. Two longboats, manned by a roguish group of seamen, were oaring across the southern wall, away from the unconventionally designed watercraft. The western wall displayed a marvelously picturesque vista, a creamy rose mesa that eased into a central band of blood red and climaxed into a black-crowned top. Tides lapped along the seashore onto a white sand beach. Central in that wall sim was an entry to a cave. Back around a bend in the crags and to the west, cliff dwellings peaked from the mesa tops like rows of sightless skulls. The outer walls at the base of the mesa had been cut and fitted into high castle-like parapets using layers of rectangular creamy red sandstone. Eccentrically dressed Anasazi were engaged in simple activities like gardening, various types of crafting from pottery to jewelry, and sorting baskets of maize, tubers, and both edible and medicinal herbs. Clumps of tall Rocky Mountain penstemon, blazing torches of lavender, grew in aggressive clumps around the village. Bristly, broad-leafed yucca, like spiky, chaya-headed hedgehogs, grew in the settlement. And along the rolling hills, Phil, after mentally saving the images of the wall sim and the collected debris, watched Rena again. Rena entered the safe and retrieved a handful of flat metallic and crystal devices about the size of a USB thumb drive. One side had glyphs embossed on the metal. The other side of each device had a small adhesive label typed in English that identified the SIM drive. Rena kicked the safe door shut. She then retraced her steps to the lever block near her desk. Rena removed the 2 SIM drives that were labeled Caribbean Cruise and threw the others into her desk drawer. She stepped up to the metal plate in the wall and ejected a SIM drive into 2 out of 3 orifices. The last orifice, under the lever she'd toggled that had opened the door to her father's office, was already filled, but with a different type of driver that was permanently fused into the receptacle. She toggled the switch and closed the door to her father's room, and keyed in a numeric sequence on the keypad that was built into the wall to the right side of the metal plate that contained the SIM receptacles and levers. Following a few flashes of light and a mechanical hum that reverberated and then died away, the bare walls around the room became an ocean vista of a cruise ship that meandered through a series of picturesque tropical islands. Sounds of tropical birds, droning insects, and the pummeling of surf against sandy beaches and rocky bluffs provided a dim aural ambience. Azure blue seascapes and misty waterfalls, along with islanders dressed like Polynesians who tended vividly colored floral gardens, potato fields and rice paddies, and spear-hunted miniature white-spotted deer and zebra-striped wild boar, presented an exotic, ever-changing panorama. Both of the other office doors disappeared, although Jack's office door was still visible, if you looked for it, behind the wall sim. Victor's door, however, was concealed. Moments before, it had rumbled shut, closing the cluttered mystery room with a stark finality. 3 more doors remained, not counting the 3 transportal elevators that contained private ingress to their penthouse suites. Like the personal suite doors, the northern access to the tunnels also remained visible. Phil's workshop, no longer the door to an abbey, had become a doorway into a grass-thatched jungle hut. By the way, my breathtaking and gorgeously beautiful cybermodel, what happened to your father? Why is that room kept locked? He looked confused as Uncle Jack mouthed, "Shut up!" Rena thrust out her arm, as if she were flowing into an expert karate move, and exclaimed, "Not a remind! Not a remind!" After crying out a streak of Greek expletives, she added, "Never, and I mean never, call me that again!" "I'm sorry," stuttered Phil. I won't say it again, ever," he promised. He thought to himself, "What did I say? I said she was breathtakingly beautiful. Was it the cybermodel thing? I didn't say Half Jack." Rena, aquiline nose in the air, quivered with rage, and then stormed to her personal elevator box transportal. "Uncle Jack, what's with the mouse lady that roared routine?" asked Phil. "What did I do wrong? What did I say?" Jack threw his arms into the air and said, "Where do I start, boyo? First you called her a name which is another name like Half Jack, and then you asked her how her father died." "I did. I asked what happened, not how he died." Jack replied, "It was the circumstances. Did you see the bloody papers? Well, it was a bit far away. I thought I saw papers with dark stains on them fall off the desk, but I wasn't sure." Jack's eyes clouded over, and he had a faraway look. Then he continued, "Philly, I should have told you this before. That blood was Victor's. I heard some of your conversation with Rena. The sim wall screens out some sound between office suites, but not everything. What she didn't tell you is that after she had killed the other couriers, she told Victor that he'd made her into a monster. Rena also told him that she wished she was dead. Victor sat at the desk, wrote a note asking me to fix the situation by saying he'd killed the couriers using an experimental bioweapon, because he'd heard them talking rudely about her, and yada yada yada, whatever else needed to be done, and to have Rena take over Dora's job doing secretarial and manual writing. He wrote on a few other requests and then sucked lead. I pulled some strings concerning the investigation and reconstructed our department. End of story. Phil arrived at the office the next morning with more flowers. He walked up to Rena's desk and said, "I'm sorry about yesterday. I brought you more flowers. I used the new and safe credit card." Rena appraised him dispassionately. "They are very nice. You made good decision by following protocols. However, I have reconsidered my weaknesses yesterday. I'm sorry I lost cool, but like I say, relationship's not good for me. When the fun is over, pain is just too much." "We can take it slow." Rena gave him that direct look that he hated and snapped, "Let me be blunt. There is no we. Have you looked at Agent Toymaker workstation?" Phil's jaw dropped, and then he hung his head. His corner of the office was empty, and the door to his workshop was gone. "I think flowers look nice on your desk. You see when you go there, it is now located in the big lab by case storage." She looked away, and then added, 3D paperweight nice. However, it is a company property. As such, it and the cube camera back in safe. Please remember that our relationship is a business only. That is all it will ever be." Phil sighed. "If that's the way it has to be, I'm sorry. I'll miss you, but I'll try to respect your wishes." Phil's body quivered, and the acidic bile erupted from his stomach into his mouth as he walked the tunnels to his new office. There had been a moped parked in a niche, but he ignored it. He tried to concentrate on his work, but he felt lonely and miserable. During lunch, while she was away, he put the flowers back on her desk. They were prominently displayed in her trash receptacle when he came back to the office on his way back to his penthouse suite. When he would come through the office on his way to K-Lab, she either wasn't there or ignored him. Even Threep, her mechanical butler, stopped visiting him. Time passed heavily for the next several weeks. One night, Uncle Jack invited him over to his and Dora's penthouse for a surprise birthday party for Rena. When Phil arrived carrying a large gift wrapped in red foil, she blushed and looked away. But C3, his chrome gleaming a fine golden sheen, exclaimed, "Why, Master Phil, it is so very good to see you. I have missed you terribly. But, lady, "Quit the babbling, Threep," snapped Rena. She added, "You embarrass me." Dora, Jack's wife, was dressed in a fine violet and lavender Burberry check evening gown, purchased during a recent visit to London. Dora said, "It's time, C3, to prepare the dining area. We'll be in shortly." "Yes, Lady Dora," said C3. He bowed and then ambled off to the dining room. Dora scowled at Rena and said, "Philly, dear, why don't we get you something from the bar?" Dora guided his elbow to the lounge area. "I see you are using the Louis XIV sim, Auntie Dora. That's one of ours, not one of the ancients' devices that were found in the original caverns." One end of the room contained a wall-sized blazing sun attended by cherubs. Unlike the real sun, one could gaze at this sun without ill effects. Dora and Jack's suite was shaped as if it were cut from the same mold as Phil's suite, except that, rather than being roughly circular, Phil's suite was a half-circle in shape, cut down the middle like a wheel of cheese. Phil and Dora stepped through a holosim of leaping dolphins. He could almost feel the splash of imaginary water, even though neither the dolphins nor the water droplets that splashed from them were real. Water plops and dolphin chitters were not imaginary sounds, but seemed even more real than the momentary touch of water droplets. Phil realized that the water drops weren't real, but his body reacted to them as if they were real. He felt that the water plop sensations were real, but he had only felt them dimly. Dora said, "I can't wait to see your gift for Rena. We gave her a box of books. She loves books. Mystery, fantasy, SF, and poetry are her favorites." Dora's voice dropped into whisper mode as she leaned into Phil's ear. "If Rena's not strapped into that VR module in her suite, doing combat sims or fantasy role-playing adventures, she's got that beak of hers in a book." She paused and continued, "Rena speaks broken English, but don't let that fool you. She can read and write quite well." He and Auntie Dora stepped through the leaping dolphins into a tropical paradise. Fountains that gurgled before them in the center of the room were real, not illusions. Mists from the splashing font tickled his face and arms like 1,000 icy fingertips. Walls of sandy beach and island landscape that surrounded the lushly accoutred room were sim-crafted. A roofed, open-sided bamboo cantina, complete with a central wet bar and exterior umbrella, topped patio seating in the center of the large room, was genuine. Phil pushed aside a palm frond that had snagged the sparkly metallic red foil that wrapped his gift. Vibrantly tinted lilies and irises painted splashes of brilliant reds, purples, and blues across the greenery nestled around the perimeter of the polished granite font. Mostly emerald with dashes of black and gold and streaks of white and milky gray, the fountain tickled one's auditory and visual senses. The beautiful scenery did not captivate Phil, only the vision of Rena. She was dressed much the same as usual, layers of dark sweaters, and an ankle-length skirt over sweats. But today she also wore a cashmere scarf of royal blue with a seashell clasp. Jack, dressed in a Sir Paul Smith of London creation, known for formal menswear with a dash of audacity, loosened his blood-red tie, plain except for a small stylized tiger next to a palm tree and under a rainbow. After unbuttoning the collar of the baby blue Oxford shirt, he unbuttoned the oversized tiger-eye ruby fasteners and squirreled out of the smoky gray sports jacket. Jack tossed it across a bar stool, which revealed a unique button-down shirt with a rainbow emblazoned from the right shoulder to his left hip, and the print from the tie on the pocket. "What did you expect, Boyle?" he added with his best Sean Connery imitation. "Your Auntie Dora thought it was stylishly cheeky." Dropping the British accent, Jack continued, "I'm mixing the usual, a pitcher of Royal Crown and Pepsi. Double stiff on the Royal. There's beer on tap, too. Leinenkugels, Killian's Red, and MGD." As Dora let go of his elbow, he joined Rena on the patio. Well, if you want to see what Rena's reaction was to Phil's gift, you'll have to listen to Part 3 of Half Jack and Leprechaun.